Today, let's talk about divine appointments. I'm going to read you from Acts chapter 8, verses 32 through 35, where we read this. The place in the scripture which he read was this: He was led as a sheep to the slaughter, and as a lamb before its shearer is silent, so he opened not his mouth. In his humiliation, his justice was taken away. And who will declare his generation? For his life is taken from the earth. So the eunuch answered Philip and said, I ask you, of whom does the prophet say this? Of himself or of some other man? Then Philip opened his mouth and, beginning at this scripture, preached Jesus to him. Isn't it amazing when God perfectly arranges things? God told Philip to leave a successful season of ministry and go to a complete wilderness. Philip then saw a chariot, and the man in the chariot was reading Isaiah the prophet. Then the man asked for help and understanding. Hey, all of that was an amazing divine appointment. Now, on top of all that, the man in the chariot read from that remarkable prophetic passage of Isaiah chapter 53, speaking of the Lord's suffering servant. That man in the chariot read the words, He was led as a sheep to the slaughter. In God's wonderful planning, the Ethiopian was reading the amazing and specific prophecies in Isaiah 53 describing the sacrificial, sin-bearing work of the Messiah to come. Then the man in the chariot asked an important question. I ask you, of whom does the prophet say this, of himself or of some other man? Regarding this passage from Isaiah chapter 53, the Jews of that day had different ways that they understood the identity of this suffering servant. Now, some thought that the suffering servant was the nation of Israel itself, as Israel had suffered greatly in wars, exile, and persecution. Secondly, some thought that the suffering servant was Isaiah writing about himself. But third, some thought that the suffering servant was the Messiah, but they found this hard to accept because they didn't want to think of the Messiah as suffering. Now, all three of these ideas could be true in some way. Though there was a lesser sense in which the Isaiah 53 passage was true of Israel as a nation and true of Isaiah as a prophet, yet there's no mistaking that its main and greatest sense is speaking of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, about his role as the Lord's suffering servant. It isn't helpful to pretend that all interpretations of a Bible passage are equal. And Philip, you can be sure, avoided this error when he spoke to the man in the chariot. Now, Philip explained how these words from Isaiah 53 spoke of Jesus, the Messiah. He explained it to the man in the chariot beginning at this scripture. It was easy to talk about Jesus beginning at this scripture, and Philip did what he should. He preached Jesus to him. It was a divine appointment that arranged all of this in Acts chapter 8. By other divine appointments, God has brought Jesus Christ to you. This same Jesus suffered as a servant for you. So, by faith, receive and cherish today all that he has sacrificed to bring you into right relationship with God. As I said before, that's something that you can do and do today.